Chavre, how are you? Today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh Matos Masei. We're in the second Shabbos of the 3 weeks. It's also Shabbos Chazak. We finished Sefer Bamidbar. So we have to understand the connection between all these inyanim, Matos and Masei. As we'll soon discuss, but as usual, since the war started, we have added tzedakah. We're giving tzedakah, gdeilik tzedakah, shemakareves esagula. The war should end now, and Mashiach should come. It should be the gula mitzvah shleima taken from miyad mamish. We'll say a prayer. This is something we say every single morning. Vaydaber Hashem, Vaydaber Adonai Moshe Leimer, Daber Elarim V'Bonav Leimer, Keis Varachu Es Bnei Yisrael Lemer Lahem. Hashem spoke to Moshe Rabbeinu and he says, speak to Aaron and his children, saying, this is how you should bless the Yidden. Say to them, Yivarecha Adonai v'Yishmerecha, Yoyer Adonai Panav Elecha v'Chunecha, Yisa Adonai Panav Elecha v'Yosim L'cha Shalom. So, I'm not going to translate now. Let me just say, endless blessings and blessings to everyone. In this week's Parsha, we have something which is unusual, and we've pointed this out before, that in Chumash, there's the cycle of the year following Chumash. The Parsha of the week was Medaf Leb Miditzait. As we all know, the saying of the Alter Rebbe, we're meant to live with the times, internalize, talk about the relevance of the Parsha. As we said many times, all the messages that Hashem is sending you is coming through this week's Parshas HaShavua. Every single day of every single week, Hashem is speaking to you. You just got to know how to listen through the Parsha of the week. So there's one message that comes from the Parsha, but there's also the Jewish calendar, Tishrei Cheshvan, and events that are happening in the Jewish calendar that happened on a certain day, and the significance of that day is eternal. As we all know, the word from the Arizal, whose Yortzeit is coming up this Hey Menachemov next week. Friday, and a week from today, is Hey Menachemov, and he said, Hayom Meilun Uskarim Menasim, when we remember the days properly, so then it's re-experiencing all the energies and the forces that are happening in that day, and if you switch in, tune in, then you re-experience. There's a reenactment to an even a greater degree of the original event. So this week is actually Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av. As we all know, what happened on Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av, the Yortzeit Yom Elul of Aaron HaKohen, Aaron Kohen Gadol. Now we spoke about the subject before, just recently in Pashas Chukas, where it said that Moshe passed away and that he was buried in Har. We just spoke about it a couple of weeks ago at Chukas. But guess what? In this week's Parsha, Parshas Masei, it says, V'Aaron ben Sholish v'Esrim u'ma'as shana. Aaron was 123 years old, b'Mosei b'Hoir Har. When he passed away, and by Hoir Har, where he was buried. So, as we'll discuss today, what I'm going to speak about today is basically straight up a Sikh of the Rebbe in volume 23 of Likutei Sichos, Bamidbar Masei Beis, page 229, and also a Sikh of the Rebbe from Parshas Vayera, Tovshin Mem Gimel, 1982, Parshas Vayera, which was 120, we were starting to say the 123rd Kapitel of Tilim in honor of the 122nd birthday of the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe. We'll get to that. I'm just telling you first the source of where I'm taking today's lesson from. So we hear immediately that this idea, the unusualness, the unusual point that Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av, which is Yom Elul of Aaron, happens always in the week. This is the Shabbos. My name is Baruch and Kuliyim, and Parshas Masei always falls out in the neighborhood of Hey Menachem Av. So there's coinciding the cycle of the Chumash. So it's a message from Parshas Masei this week, and also the fact in the calendar comes to Hey Menachem Av. Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av. So that gives us a double Hello, do I have your attention? So it's a double message about the idea of Aaron HaKohen. Havei mitalmidav shel Aaron HaKohen oyev shalom v'reidiv shalom. That's going to be what we're going to be talking about today. So, since we have a double reminder that we're supposed to focus on this idea, that's what we're going to do. So the Sikha in Chelik Chof Gimel, the Rebbe brings the Pasuk, and he brings a Yerushalmi that says that Meyo ve'esrim v'sholish pa'omim she'Yisrael oinin halaluka ba'amiras halal kineged shneisav shel Aaron. The Yerushalmi says that the Yidden would say 123 times Hallelujah during the saying of Hallel. So in other words, there's a chazan, and there was 123 times where the chazan would say in the verses where he made a pause, and the Yidden were meant to answer Hallelujah. That's what the Yerushalmi says. And the Yerushalmi gives a reason that what's the connection between this idea that you should remember that it's 123 times corresponding to the years that Aaron lived, because the Yerushalmi says, Hallelujah, there's a passage that says, Hallelujah b'kodshei, Hashem is praised through the holy ones, and la'Aaron kiddushei. La'Aaron kodesh Hashem, that says Aaron was considered the holiest because he's the Kohen Gadol, so he's the holiest of holies, and he goes into the Kodesh Kodshim. So, therefore, and we have the pasuk that says that Hashem is praised through the holy ones, and Aaron represents the holiest of the holies. So, therefore, this idea that we say 123 times Hallelujah is similar to every one of us becomes a symbol, an idea of Aaron, that by us saying it 123 times, it represents the idea that he's praised to the holy ones, similar to the idea of Aaron. We'll all become a bit of Aaron by saying it 123 times. That's what the Yerushalmi says. But the Rebbe says, obviously, there has to be a deeper connection. There has to be a theme. There's something connected to the theme of Hallel that makes it connected to this idea of Aaron. And he also brings a Rambam. The Rambam brings this down in Hilchas Chanukah, and the Rambam says the Lashon like this, that after the person who was like the Mevorach HaGodel would read the Hallel, he would say Hallelujah, and then the whole nation would say Hallelujah. Like in the first pasuk, it says Hallelujah, and then it says Hallelu Avdei Hashem, and then the whole nation would say Hallelujah, and then it would say Hallelu Hashem Hashem, and the whole nation would say Hallelujah. And this the Rambam brings in Hilchas Chanukah, where it speaks about saying Hallel and Chanukah. And then the Rambam finishes that halacha, Ad shenimtzu oinim b'chol ha'Hallel, Hallelujah, meya v'sholish v'esrim pamim. So it comes out in some total that they would say 123 times, Hallelujah, siman lahem shneisav shel Aaron. And a siman to remember that it was 123 is the years that Aaron lived. Obviously, the siman that you can make also on another level is 1, 2, 3. So 123, 1, 2, 3 is the siman of how many times it said Hallelujah. So over here the Rebbe asks the question, besides what the Yerushalmi says, that the Rambam, who's known to be halachas, everything's a law, and it's not the way, and the style, and the manner of the whole Sefer of the Rambam to just write things that are like a sign. So the question is, why would the Rambam write this word that's similar to Shneis of Shalarin in Hilchas Chanukah, especially if it's a Sefer that the Rambam himself says halachas, that means it has to have an halachic significance. So look in the Sikha over there, Chelik of Gimel Balichas. I'm just going to bring out the Nakuda of what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe is saying that in halacha, there's many times that we say that, the one Kol HaShemea Ka'ena, if you just hear, it's as if you responded. And even the more so, when you say, Ha'ena Omein Achar HaMavorach, Harei Ze Ki Mevorech, If you answer something, it's as if you make the blessing yourself. But over here, the word is, and the Rebbe brings different opinions, that according to the Rambam, the fact that over here we say that the whole nation says 123 times Hallelujah, it's the top level. In other words, the fact that we have to do such a thing in general is because there's many people of the nation that don't know how to read properly, and they're a bit ignorant. And that's the whole reason why we have these things like Chazor Shashatz and everything, different parts of davening. That's what we usually say. But we don't make it as if it's mamish, literally, that when it comes to this thing, whatever that piece of davening is, it's considered as if you did the whole thing yourself, just by answering Amen. Over here, the Chiddush is, we have a new situation. That there's a situation where throughout the whole prayer of Hallel, you have a participation. What's your participation? 123 times throughout the whole Hallel. And because of that participation, in a way of 123 times throughout the whole Hallel, it's as if you said the whole Hallel. Everyone has like the top level performance. That's what the Rebbe brings out, and the Rebbe talks about it Al Pi Halacha, see there, and that's what makes this situation unique. See there. The point that the Rebbe brings out is that, in other words, it's not a b'diavad, it's not a plan B, it's not that we just yoytze, like making do. No, this is like top level, and everyone is able to fulfill and perform the top level because they themselves say 123 times Hallel. And this, the Rebbe says, is the connection with Aaron. Since Aaron is about Avos Yisrael, so the whole idea that there's such a thing, that we participate also, that was Bechlal about Avos Yisrael. You know, an Achdus and a Tzibur, everything becomes one entity. But in this case, by Hallel, we make it the top level, that level of Achdus, that everyone is considered as one entity, all equally fulfilling it in the highest level, together, forever, as one, is that the siman Kishneisav Shel Aaron, because that's what Aaron represents. And now we understand why the Rambam brings it down in the Sefer of Halachas. This whole idea is because he wants to tell us the Chiddush over here, the level of Achdus that's accomplished, that everyone fulfills it at the same level, halachically considered top level performance. And the siman is because the idea is that over here we see the ultimate of Achdus. Okay. So before we get back to that, I want to go with Matos, Masei this week. So first I want to go back to Parshas Matos. We always make connections. This week's Parshas Matos, we spoke about this before other years. It speaks about the war against Midian. Everyone knows in Teres Achsidis, on the discourses of Heicholzu, it speaks about the spiritual significance of Midian. Every nation of the Goyish world represents a spiritual deficiency. And we have to look inside ourselves to deal with that deficiency, that flaw. And we deal with that deficiency, that flaw, and we take care of that eradicates the physical manifestation of that problem. So, like for example, in Amalek, anybody who studied Chassidus even a bit knows how Chassidus goes to town with Amalek and the concept of Amalek, of coldness and indifference and doubt. So too when it comes to Midian Miloshin Modoin Umriva, Midian represents divisiveness. And we know during the period of the 3 weeks in particular, we say that the Churban, the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, came about because of sinas chinam, baseless hatred. So the Eibishter made the cure in Parshas Matos, which always falls out during the period of the 3 weeks, which is where we're mourning the destruction of the temple. We have the antidote, the Torah Sachsidis, that talks about the problem of sinas chinam, that a person just can't stand another person because he takes up space. And we all have this a bit that we find the other person so annoying, and we find that that person is a threat to me, and now's not the time to get into it because we spoke about this already other times, but there is this concept, and everyone else suffers and is afflicted with a bit of this problem, how the other person is seen as a threat to my existence, and this is what we have to work on to do the opposite and go to the opposite extreme, Avas Chinam, Avas Yisrael, and like the Rebbe said thousands of times, Botla Sibe is Botla Mesuvif. The whole cause of Golus came because of Sinas Chinam. If we'll take away the cause through acting in a way of Avas Chinam, so then we'll bring Mashiach. So, by the way, and I also mentioned it before, the Rebbe gave out many kontresim, booklets, pamphlets of Chassidus. One of them was the Maimer Hecholzu. I think it was Tafshim Memtes, 1988, Chav Cheshvan. He gave out the Maimer Hecholzu, and this is the only time. And he gave out, let's say, for example, 30 times there was distribution of kontresim. I'm talking about throughout all the years. I'm taking a guess, estimate, let's say 30 times. There's only one time when the Rebbe gave out a kuntres, and the Rebbe said, every single person that he gave this kuntres to, which were thousands of people, and he repeated to each one, the other times when he gave out distribution of a Torah kuntres, a pamphlet, he didn't say anything. This time he said to every single person, he gave out a Maimer Cholzu of the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, a famous discourse, Hecholzu Tov Reish Nun Tes, which the whole discourse talks about baseless hatred, Sinas Chinam and Avas Chinam. And he talks about the ego and how you deal with the ego. So at that time, when the Rebbe gave out this pamphlet, this discourse of the Rebbe Rashab, of the 5th Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Rebbe had told every single person that he gave it to, people were wondering, what does it mean? So Mashpim at that time said, what does it mean when the Rebbe said, a successful learning? That the learning should bring to action. That means by studying this discourse, it should come down not only in a level of learning and understanding as an intellectual idea, but it should come down into actuality. We should change. We should become different. We should have more Avos Yisrael. So we see Parshas Matos has the whole idea of Avos Yisrael as explained in all the discourses which talk about the problem of Modoim, divisiveness and discord. So too Parshas Masei, which talks about how Aaron passes away 123 years, and once we see the name of Aaron and he passed away, immediately we come to mind, we should be mitalmidav shel Aaron. We have an instruction. Hevei mitalmidav shel Aaron. Doesn't say that about too many people. But here we have a clear instruction. Be from the disciples of Aaron. Are you a Talmud of Aaron? Oyev shalom, v'reidev shalom, oyev asabriyas mekarvan l'teira. Now all this that we spoke about has particular significance this year, because this year, Yud Aleph Nisan, I don't know if I spoke about it this year, and I haven't heard too many people speak about it. This year, Yud Aleph Nisan, we started Kapitel Kov Chav Gimel, the 123rd Psalms, Kapitel Tilim. And in the year Tafshin Mem Gimel, when it was the Rebbe Rashab's Kapitel Kov Chav Gimel, the Rebbe spoke that year, see the Farbrengen of Parshas Vayera, Tafshin Mem Gimel, and the Rebbe spoke about the idea of what we hear the Psalm 123, the first thing that comes to mind is Shneis of Shel Aaron HaKohen, the years of Aaron HaKohen. So the same thing over here now. In the year that we're saying, Kapitel Kov Chav Gimel from the Rebbe, immediately for the whole year, we have to kochzich. We have to be obsessed with this idea that immediately comes to mind. You're saying Kapitel Kuf Chav Gimel every day. Immediately should come to mind. Having a Talmid of Shalarin, Oyev Shalom, Reid of Shalom, Oyev Sabris. So at that time, the Rebbe spoke about the connection between why the Rambam brings this siman in Hilchas Chanukah, this statement, this fact that he brings about halal, which he brings in Hilchas Chanukah, and he added a couple of different points to it, different than what he said in Likutei Sichos. In addition, number one, the Rebbe said that, what's Chanukah? Chanukah comes from the word Chanukas Habayis. What happened? What's the celebration of Chanukah? Where the temple was rededicated, inaugurated once again. They had to cleanse out the impurity. And the word Chanukah comes from Chanukas Habayis, the rededication. What do we know about rededication? Rededication, the Rebbe says, means, and he writes down the Lashon over there in the Sikha, that means that the thing is done with the shturim, with a big bang. And that's how Chassidus explains the idea of Chanukas Habayis. See also Vayigash, the Maimer Vayigash Tofrei Samar Vov. Like, for example, when we bring a child into Cheder, we throw candies at him, and that's meant to last him a lifetime. In other words, at the beginning, at the launch, we put extra boost, greater infusion, super overload, and that overload, that super energy, that super force is supposed to go for the rest of his life. And that's the whole idea of chinuch. When things start at the beginning, at the launch, we make a huge infusion, and that infusion is enough to keep it going forever. That's the idea of a Chanukas Habayis. By the way, I mentioned this already before, the only farbrengen that you have to make in your home is a Chanukas Habayis farbrengen. Every other celebration you have in life doesn't have to be in your home. You don't have to make a bris of your child in your home. You don't even have to make a Shalom Zachar in your home. The only thing you have to make in your home is a Chanukas Habayis, a celebration of opening, a grand opening of your home, of your living. Why? Because that's the whole point. When you invite all your friends and they bring you gifts and they give you brachas, those brachas are mamshich, blessings and spiritual energies that will infuse the house, and then the house becomes a house filled with blessings, and those blessings are the fuel to keep everything going in an amazing way. So this is what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe says that when we said Shneisav Shel Aaron, and we put it by Chanukah, it means that the inyanim of Aaron have to be in the way of Chanukah with a major shturim. That means the Avos Yisrael is with the shturim. And he also says, we say Shneisav Shel Aaron 123, that means the ideas of Avos Yisrael is at the highest level. We're not even talking about Aaron during his lifetime. When Aaron passes away, that's like the greatest day of his life, the culmination of his entire lifetime. So it doesn't only mean just a plain level of Aaron's Avos Yisrael, but it's the climax, the top level, the ultimate level of Avos Yisrael. And also, the Rebbe over there says that when we say the idea of Chanukah and connected to Shneisav Shel Aaron, Chanukah is about illuminating, bringing light into the world, bringing light into the darkness. Al Pesach Beisim B'chutz. So again, it's about outreach. And the outreach should be in a way of Avos Yisrael. I don't know why the Rebbe doesn't mention this, but it's included. Simply that Chanukah is the idea about the lights of Chanukah. As we all know, the famous Ramban, Shel Chog Delim Shalahem, that the service of Aaron in the Beis Hamikdash, Ba'alois Chos HaNeiros, is also included the lighting of the Chanukah lights. So the idea of Aaron is kindling the menorah. The idea of Chanukah is kindling a menorah. So Yesh Leimah, very simple. That's why the Rambam, when he mentions the idea of the Halukas, and he says a siman, so when you think about Chanukah, which is about lighting a menorah, we also think immediately about Aaron lighting. And what does lighting mean? Lighting means to ignite the other person, illuminate the other person, Ba'aloischa, lift up the other person. And now we see the connection between Rosh Chodesh Menachemov, Parshas Matos, Parshas Masei, and the 3 weeks. And even though last week we already spoke about Avos Yisrael and how the Eibush themselves gives witness and says, wow, look at the Yidden. And even though we might speak about it often, I believe, there's a saying, I think we said this once before, people say that the Jewish people are the people of the book. I think in a certain sense we should say, what is Judaism? What is the Torah? The book about the people. That means, since Neshamas Yisrael and Mush is higher than Torah, as we know the famous Tana de Be'eliyo, Daber el B'nai Yisrael, Tzav is B'nai Yisrael. First is a B'nai Yisrael, then comes the commandments of the Torah. Machshavten sheYisrael kodma l'chol davar. That means in every single pasuk and every single word of the Torah, it's all about the Givald von Ayid. And we have to stress that again and again and again. And therefore, that's how our conduct will change when it comes to Avos Yisrael. And therefore, it'll only bring brachas to Klal Yisrael. B'cheinu avinu kolona ke'echad. When it gave to Aaron, now it's already too late, so we're not going to elaborate in the story. But oyev shalom v'roidev shalom means he brought peace. How did he bring peace? It's brought on him in Moreh Chazal. He would, if two people were in an argument, he would go over to one and say the other one is so sorry, even though it wasn't really true. And that's the whole chiddush between Moshe and Aaron. Moshe is emes, Aaron is chesed, mutar l'shan is bnei hasholem. You're allowed to lie. Be careful what I'm saying now, don't take it out of context. But in order to bring peace. And there's a famous story where in one case he was bringing peace between husband and wife. The wife, I think, spat him in the eye. So he was humiliated to the degree of humiliation just to bring peace between a husband and a wife. So it shows in his humility and his humiliation and what he went through to try to bring peace. Anybody knows about life, when two people have an argument, especially husband and wife, it can get very, very complicated and very complex and very difficult and very painful. And here we see that this is what we're saying is the praise of Aaron. He got involved. He rolled up his sleeves. He got down and dirty, so to speak, to listen to the pain of each side and the deep, deep, deep frustrations, etc., to bring peace. And it reminds me similar to the famous story of the Baal Shem Tov. And again, I'm not going to say the details now, but the bottom line from the story is that one time the Baal Shem Tov made a sukkah, which is a highly problematic sukkah. I'll be the halacha. It was like 2.5 walls, and it was problematic. And there were Rabbonim that heard about it, and they made a whole scandal, and they came down to investigate, and they decided the sukkah is not kosher. And then, as we know the famous story, the Baal Shem Tov rolled up his hand, he pulled out a piece of paper from a malach, and it said that this sukkah is kosher. And they were just speechless. He pulled out a piece of paper that was signed by a malach, and they had no other choice but to say it was kosher. And the Rebbe explains the whole story over here. Why did the Baal Shem Tov have such a sukkah which could be questionable and to such a degree that even some rabbis deemed that it was not fit? And the answer was because the Baal Shem Tov knew that there were many, many Jews that were living in abject poverty, and they couldn't bring together, muster all the details, all the points that have to be made in order to have a good kosher on a grand scale on a top level. They could only make one that would be like scrapping together a b'diavad sort of sukkah. So therefore, he himself, the Baal Shem Tov, had the Mesiras Nefesh to have a sukkah, which is like a b'diavad sort of sukkah, in order to make it possible that all of Klal Yisrael, even those that are in the most poorest situation, should also be able to have a sukkah, which would also be considered kosher. So just like the Aaron HaKohen was humiliated spiritually in order to bring peace, and it comes out of Avos Yisrael, so too the Baal Shem Tov was humiliated, beruchnius, like he's fulfilling his mitzvah of sukkah on a lower level, just that it should be considered kosher for Klal Yisrael, and so much so to the degree that it becomes a target and a piece of people gossip by all these different big scholars and Torah scholars that they're discussing. Look at this Baal Shem Tov, what's he doing? And they even came to investigate themselves, and they deemed it that it was unfit. So the Baal Shem Tov puts himself into such a shameful sort of situation, but why? Only for Avos Yisrael. So this is what we should learn from Aaron HaKohen, Hevei B'Talmidav Shel Aaron, and so too from the Baal Shem Tov, Sometimes we have to forego our ego, our feelings, and be mevater al midoisov. And through our Avos Yisrael, this will bring the Gula Mitzvah Shlema. Take it from a yad, mamish, posting from my home. Be'ez Shem Yisborich, your man in Melbourne.